Hey, everybody. Welcome to Get Paid. Happy Thursday. Great to see you. Great to see you, Deb. So, look, we've been talking about this subject quite a bit over the last several months, or well, since we started almost. And it's about what the pandemic did to the lives and the professional future of women, right? And so as we have gone through the pandemic and we were on this lockdown, so you couldn't work from anywhere but home, it really, the research shows, and in talking to other professional women, if you had younger children, you had to not only be whatever that title was, whether you were an SVP or EVP or manager or an independent contributor, you also had to be teacher. You were teaching from home. You were homeschooling, not by choice, but by circumstance. And so that was an issue. If your children were very young, there was no daycare or preschools open. So you had to, this sounds awful, but the truth is you had to be a homeschooler and you had to be mommy all the time. And while we are mommy all the time, we don't always have to. When we're at the office, we can focus on what we're focusing on, but we had to be mommy all the time. If you had, whatever your circumstance was, it was amplified when you were home. And so, Deb and I were talking this week because there's a lot of buzz now about, well, what does that mean when women go back to the office? And Deb was sharing this great article that she read. And I thought this is a great time to really kind of discuss, what does that mean? We're going back to the office. There's obviously, well, I hate that word obviously, but there is a gender divide. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So, and let's just be clear. I know that there are also plenty of men who are the caregivers for their children and who had that same exact thing happen to them over the pandemic. But the lion's share of the articles and the information that's coming at us indicates that women tend to be that caregiver even when both parents are working. And so when everybody was working at home, as you said, it just amplified everything, in particular for women. Many women had to either step back, come out of the workforce altogether. There was a lot of issues that came up out of it. And now that offices are returning to work, there's another issue that's coming up for women, and that's the issue of flexibility. And what we're seeing and what I've been reading is articles around which companies are taking a lesson from the pandemic, acknowledging that their workforces were very productive when they were not in the office, and figuring out the best return to work and what makes sense for their employees, and really listening to their employees, and which industries, companies, whatever you want to call it, are like, well, you know what, that's behind us. Now we have to go back to the way it was. We're never more productive than when we're all together all the time. And I think what's happening is that people who are having to return to work are starting to push back and voice their concerns. And one company that just comes to mind, because it was just in the news, was Apple. Apple's been hearing from its employees several times now via petition around their desire to have people returning to the office. I don't know the exact amount of time they want them back, but whatever it is, they are getting big pushback. And I think yesterday they've decided to slow down their return to work because of the Delta variant and the unknowns with that. But I also think it has to do with them getting another pushback this week also from their employees. But some of the articles that I read, some of the interesting things that he talked about was that companies that, well, first of all, most of the decisions around return to work are going to be made by men, because most companies are headed by men. That's just a fact, right? Go ahead.
Right. That is a fact. What I'm also seeing is sometimes when there's a man at the top, but there are women in some of those seats of power. It depends on who that man is, because there are some times where there have been men who have said, oh, we'll be a little more flexible, but they haven't really empowered the women. So then the women feel like, oh, wait, how is that going to set me up? Like, how, what does that mean for me? Right. Mm-hmm. If it was really tough for me when I was, working from home during the pandemic, how's that going to affect me go forward? Because especially with the Delta variant, how's that going to affect schools? Are they opening? Are they going to then close again? Because it really affects, the whole conversation around young people and masks, right? Because you can't vaccinate someone who's under 12 yet, right. So it takes a complicated situation and makes it even more complicated.
Definitely. And so what they're finding is that, so let's take the fact that most companies are run by men. So it is men making the decisions. And they're finding that those companies that are primarily male, many of those, let's say in finance organizations like JP Morgan Chase and Barclays and some of the other big finance companies, which are primarily male, those are the ones that are like, we're going back full force or close to full force. But companies that have a good percentage, like in the high 40s or more of women, are the ones that are likely to listen to their employees and come up with a more flexible and creative way of coming back to work. And so it's just interesting that, what we're finding is that people want flexibility. They want the choice, and women in particular, and how companies respond is going to probably begin to impact their talent.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But what's interesting to me is that number of 40% or more, right? Like where are those companies where there are 40% or more women running them? Like I think that's a whole nother examination of why does it take 40? Like that's a big number. Right. And we know if men are at the helm in most cases, so to find a company where you have to have 40% or more of one group to be heard is kind of crazy. It really, that just stuck with me. Like, wow, you have to have 40% or more for people to. So it was just interesting that that whole idea. The other idea that is there is, it goes back to what we talked about before. The flip side of it is most men, if they have a woman, a wife or someone at home, if they are a person who has a career and they're out of the office, if you're running a company, then you have the resources for staff, right? So then you get support that way. If you're wife or significant other, if you have children, is stay at home, you get support that way. So you have the support that allows you the freedom to do whatever you want, whether that's go back to work in the office or not. And so it's just another example of how that inequity of power is affecting the gender parity, right? Or the lack thereof.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting because purely anecdotally, based on my own discussions with people that I know, many of the men that I know who are, have been at home with their families, many of them do want flexibility. I don't think there's a lot of people that want to have another, hellish commute to New York or to whatever city you live in, and spending 3 hours a day on a train or in a car is not anybody's idea of fun. What I wonder though is in these organizations that are really sort of like, hey, we're going to tough this up, we're going to come back, we need to be back full force. I wonder if also there aren't times when males don't feel like they can speak up either, because it's not, it's not what the culture is, because the culture is to be like, we're back and we're together, and saying that, hey, I really like this and I'd like to only be back in the office 3 days a week may not be may not be politically savvy enough for them, or they might not feel comfortable. So I think it's a very complicated topic. I think it impacts women more, but I think it's even bigger than that. And I think right now we're starting to see the flip in terms of talent, and people, companies are now really having to look hard again for talent. The economy's gotten better and it's gotten tighter, and they're going to have to really think about it.
Well, and if you're in that situation, I think we have also seen that people are willing to leave. I mean, they would love the company, but if it's no longer working for them or the circumstances don't fit their life, and what they need, they're resigning, right? And not just resigning to stay home, they're leaving this company to go to a company that can accommodate and support their talent, right? So I get support for who I am as a professional, as well as support for what I need as from a personal perspective. And I think that companies need to consider that. It's a new day. We started having this conversation even before the pandemic, because the economy was doing so well that companies were having a hard time filling these very high salary and specialized positions. Like, they weren't just it wasn't like, McDonald's and, you see all these signs out here that these fast food restaurants are hiring. It wasn't that. It was at every level and at very high levels that people were having a hard time finding people. And I think, if nothing else, and of course it is something else, but if nothing else, these companies should understand it's a new world, right? It's a new day, and you really have to make a situation where it is supporting the whole person, not just their job, not just their career. No longer do professionals make those sacrifices, or workers make those sacrifices to have a job, because there are jobs available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a new day. And I think that the companies that are smart and forward thinking and think about ways to make a hybrid or remote or whatever combination of that work within their company, that so it works for the majority of folks, and understanding there are plenty of people in the workforce who have no choice but to go back to their job in person. Yeah. That is understood. But where there isn't that requirement, companies are going to need to really think about long term, and not just about the Delta variant. Like, it needs to be more about, how do we work?
I agree. And I think that for those companies where they know that their employees are in situations where they might not have another choice, this is an opportunity to really step up, right? And to be the bigger person, and to be the bigger company. And that's how you start to win on so many different levels. So, I think it's opportunity for everyone. So what do you think the bottom line is, Deb?
Well, I just think the bottom line is, companies, whether they're led by men or primarily male or a combination, they really need to listen to their associates, find out what they really want and need, make a real decision around how much you really need to be back in the office and for what reason. Because if the reason is to collaborate, then have some, create some collaboration days or collaboration opportunities. But being in a physical office isn't what creates work. Work is done by people when they sit down and do their work, and people figure it out, and they have figured it out. So just be mindful that as talent gets tighter and tighter, and people start thinking about jobs in terms of how they impact their whole selves, if you're going to be very rigid about your return to work policy, you may find yourself down the road having to rethink it.
That's great. Thank you. I totally agree with you. So, we have all these hot topics, so much to talk about. But guess what? We're going to take a little break. So August is coming, and, it's the time to kind of relax, rejuvenate, come back with fresh ideas, fresh conversations, and fresh points of view. And so we are going to be gone for the next 3 weeks. Deb's going to be in my happy place. She's going to be on vacation at the vineyard. So jealous. I am going to be a few different places, but the big plan is to take my son to college. I'm so excited that he actually gets to get on campus. So I hope he's as excited as I am. But anyway, we will be back on August 19th, and we'll be bright and refreshed and ready to pick up getting paid from where we've left off. So we hope to see you. Mark your calendars. August 19th, we'll be back. You guys take care. Enjoy the next 3 weeks. Enjoy August. And take some time for yourself. Because once we get back in the swing and school starts, it is on.
It is. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Take care.